Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life with Sterling Fox on AM 650.
Nice to have you with us on this episode of Boomer Life. We're talking about cancer with our guests from Integrative Naturopathic Medical Center on West Broadway here in Vancouver. Dr. Lawrence Chan is one of the co-founders of Integrative, and Dr. Alex Chan, conveniently a member of the family and also a member of the medical team at the clinic. And we were talking, Alex, with you just before the break about what happens when a person who has been diagnosed with cancer comes to Integrative Naturopathic Medical Center, and you started to talk about how your teammates, your colleagues, begin to gather around this person and first and foremost provide information. Because I think, and we've talked about this a couple of times already, cancer scares the bejeepers out of most of us. It's just a terrible thing. And if someone says you've got cancer and they're wearing a white jacket, they've just changed your life. And no matter how tough you think you are, you're just in all of a sudden, you're in a big emotional mess. So that's part of it, isn't it? When they come to a place like Integrative, there's more than just a cancer diagnosis. There's a person who in many cases is in pretty tough shape.
And that person really, there's a person that cancer is living inside. And the oncologist's job is really to focus on the cancer.
As he or she should.
As they should. And we feel that our job is really to remember that the rest of the person around them needs support as well. And so we got into that conversation. We started to about food
Sure.
and how what you're eating really affects not only the cancer, but you as an entire being,
right.
entire person. And so that's really equally important. So we'll look at things like nutrition. We'll look at how the person's handling that diagnosis, their mental emotional status.
Right.
And really get into what they can do.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Larry, you mentioned that you had counselors available because in some cases, I mean, it's the C word. Somebody says you got cancer. I'm afraid I'm going to need to sit down and pull my head together, and it may take a while. It's life-altering. And I'm sure that people come and they're kind of a sad state of affairs emotionally.
If you don't have a sense of hope or a sense of control or understanding of what you're going through, you won't survive as well.
Right.
And that's statistics bear that out. If they have a measure of control and measure of hope, you can definitely do better with the whole process.
Now, one of the things that you do, I think, Alex, and you're doing, both of you are doing an outstanding job of it right now, is educating people and patients, cancer patients, when they come to Integrative. You look at the big picture, the person, and you talk about their diet and perhaps the other medical conditions they may be dealing with, Larry, that you've talked about. And, if you've got to combine medical therapies and so on. But ultimately, information is power. And all we know, or generally speaking, Alex, someone says you got cancer, your first reaction is going to be, am I going to die? And if the doc says, well, maybe not, oh, good. When do I have my surgery? That's usually the next thing. They're going to open me up and cut it out. That's not necessarily always the case, is it?
Not necessarily the case, nor is that necessarily what people should jump to.
But we do, because we panic.
Of course. And really, I think in any situation, this situation being no different, the thing to remember is the cancer didn't happen overnight. So really taking another second to pause, take a couple deep breaths, and then really evaluate where we go from here is important. And one of the things that we like to tell our patients is that, we will walk this path beside you, and that if you get through this process, we're going to help you change your life, and you'll come out the other side healthier than you went into it.
Okay.
Because it's about really correcting a lot of the things that were probably going wrong in your internal body terrain. In your internal system, and really helping to prevent all of those changes that set you up for that sort of ticking time bomb, that shooting of the gun.
Larry, is there a situation, suppose you're diagnosed with lung cancer and you've been smoking since you were 12. Well, gosh, what a shock. And then, I'm going to quit smoking. Okay, great. And will that make the cancer go away? Not likely. As Alex said, it's been going on for a while. Are there any forms of cancer that receive an official diagnosis that can be made to go away simply by altering lifestyle, diet, any other things? Or once you've been diagnosed, you got it and you got to deal with it?
Once you've been diagnosed and it's a significant form of cancer at that time, you have to deal with it directly.
Okay.
But one thing we do at Integrative is that we'll take the person, we'll look at two things. We'll diagnose in our way the strengths and weaknesses of that individual. And when I mentioned the strengths would be looking at them from the standpoint of what are their strong points that we can work with.
Okay.
And help them use that to overcome or help them cure or deal with that illness that they have, the cancer.
Like which organ systems are still really healthy and
Sure,
functional,
okay.
that type of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. And the other thing would be looking at their lifestyle. Are there things there that are very detrimental? How can we change it? We talk about nutrition, smoking.
Sure.
Stop smoking is the obvious one.
Maybe
right?
a little exercise, right?
Those things are all critically important.
Sure.
The other thing is then looking at metabolic toxicity. What's the state of the body's health at that time?
And you talk about old fillings. So that's a good place to start, but there's a lot more to it than that.
A lot more to it. There, are there terrible things going on in their digestive tract? They're not absorbing nutrients, not getting rid of toxins out of the body.
Right.
Those things add to that chemical mixture that creates degenerative disease like cancer.
Are they a heavy drinker and it's causing a lot of extra stress on the liver and the kidneys? So those major organs of detoxification aren't working. So if you can't get the toxins out of the body, they're going to accumulate and cause changes like cancer in the body.
And how can you really expect a person to be fully healthy from, let's say they have a cancer of, let's say a lung cancer, and they get treatment for the lung cancer medically, but they have a clogged up liver and full of toxicity that caused that to start with.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it important to get rid of those toxins out of the body? Because that person has to move on and survive and heal properly.
Sure.
That. So we need to find out what those things are, where they are, and how we can deal with that toxic level in the body. And so there's many techniques we have for that, and diagnosing that, evaluating what that is, and then treating them for that as well. That's what makes our clinic important in the sense that we look at the strengths of the body, where the weaknesses are, and what things need to be done from a detoxification standpoint.
And we're very happy to work with someone because part of naturopathic medicine is taking away any of the obstacles to cure. So if you have a major tumor that is sitting in the body that is able to have surgery or radiation or something that actually physically removes and helps shrink or lessen that tumor load,
right,
we think that that's a really important thing in some situations to really seek out that conventional care and get that procedure done.
Absolutely.
But then once that's removed, it really is about, okay, so now what? How do we make it so that it doesn't come back or it doesn't come back in some other part of the body?
Right.
Because that's one of the things that we never talk about, the fact that using certain chemo drugs and radiation can actually increase your risk of other cancers.
Right.
So really your whole system needs to work in order to maybe initially take away that tumor load, but then work to detoxify and strengthen the rest of the body system.
Okay. I want to talk about chemotherapy and radiation in a little bit, but first, even something far more fundamental that I learned during our last commercial timeout, the connection, if you will, Alex, please, between sugar and cancer.
Sugar is...
This was an eye popper for me, folks, and go ahead, please.
Yeah, so sugar is one of those things that we kind of look at as somewhat benign, although I think more and more people are realizing the addictive quality and nature of sugar.
Right.
But in particular with cancer, there's something called the Warburg effect, where cancer cells are actually very, very sensitive to sugar. They have a lot of insulin receptors on the cancer cells, far more than other cells, and they selectively use sugar to help grow and support themselves and divide and basically they promote their life cycle. So really, with someone who has cancer, we really want to look at lowering the sugar load in their diet, because that's basically just adding fuel onto the fire.
Right. It's not giving them a chance to get much better, is it?
But also the cancer cells use the sugar to grow.
Right.
So you're feeding the cancer directly.
So once diagnosed, is it typical across the board, medically speaking, that a patient diagnosed with cancer from their GP or oncologist, would they receive that information at the point of diagnosis about let's start reducing sugar right now?
They probably won't receive it from them necessarily, but they'll definitely receive it from us.
Oh, okay.
So
that's one of the things that we talked about already, that myth that it doesn't matter what you eat.
Right.
And how that possibly can be true, because it always matters what you eat, cancer or no cancer,
Sure.
but especially with cancer.
And the important caveat is that in turn of the century, the average sugar consumption in North America was about something like 5 pounds to 10 pounds a year.
Okay.
Now it's close to 150 pounds per person.
Oh, my. I hate to say it, but I believe you.
Big gulp every day.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I mean, and you look, peanut butter's got sugar.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything has sugar in it.
Because it tastes good.
Yeah. What other? Going to take a break here. Dwayne's waving his arms at us, but we'll let him wave a little longer. He needs the exercise. Talk to us, if you will, Alex, about a couple of more myths about cancer that we popularly hold that are, well, wrong?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, this comes back a little bit to that chemo conversation, but there's one myth that unless you're getting the illness from chemo, like nausea, vomiting, hair loss, the chemo is working if you get those side effects.
Oh.
And people think if I'm not getting the side effects, the chemo's not working. It needs to be that toxic level.
Chemo's awful. It just really ravages you. And so that means that's a good sign then.
Well, and that's one of the myths, that it really, there's
doesn't
other
have
ways.
to do
it
that.
doesn't have to do that.
Okay.
And a lot of the ways that we look at supporting the body help you go through that chemo process without necessarily getting that ravaging side effects.
Okay.
So that's one.
All right.
And then a lot of people believe that, there's a very, very set, stringent way about chemo regimes, and you can't deviate from that regime. And what we see is there's a lot of deviation between oncologists, same type of oncologists and specializations, one chemo regime to the other. There's a lot of variability and a lot of subjectivity to what regime that person gets.
Yeah, so quite simply, some oncologists will say to the patient, when you're doing cancer therapies with us, chemotherapy, you cannot take antioxidants.
Okay. All right.
Because that interferes with the chemotherapy. It makes them ineffective. Some oncologists will say, no, go ahead and do all you want. And as naturopaths, we're very cognizant of the fact that we don't want certain antioxidants to interfere with certain chemotherapy regimes. And there are some overlaps that are important. But the majority of the time, antioxidants are very helpful for protecting the person's body as they go through chemotherapy.
And there was a single study, a couple isolated studies that showed this, that started this myth of antioxidants are bad during cancer treatment.
Okay.
And since then, there's been a vast number of larger studies that look at all of the research on antioxidant therapy, showing that no, antioxidants are not harmful and in many cases can actually be beneficial. So that's another big
and extend life and also mitigate side effects from chemotherapy.
Okay. Let's take that break now and put Dwayne out of his misery here. And we'll come back and talk more about therapies, including chemotherapy and radiation, with our guests, Doctors Larry and Alex Chan from Integrative Naturopathic Medical Center on West Broadway, 1285 West Broadway in Vancouver. Back after this.
It's all about the baby boomer lifestyle. Boomer Life on AM 650.